Hey everybody, and welcome to a live stream from Northeast Christian Apologetics. My name is Simon Williams, and today I'm going to be giving you guys a presentation that I've given a couple times before elsewhere, but I think that would be a good addition to my channel. Definitely would like it on my own channel. So today we're going to be talking about what I like to call the problem of death's door. But before that, I just need to let you guys know that I had to keep my 4-year-old daughter home from school sick. She's upstairs watching Phineas and Ferb right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was an interruption or anything. I let her know that I'm doing this presentation, but she doesn't have very good boundary recognition right now. So, but that's okay. You know, that's just a consequence of being a parent. No big deal. I'm sure you guys understand. But like I said, today we're going to be talking about the problem of death's door, and just to give you a precursor of what we're talking about here is that this presentation that I'm giving is kind of intended for people who are new to worldview investigations, or if somebody wants to restart their worldview investigations, and I'm given a recommendation on how to go about doing that. How death seems to be a common feature of human experience, and how we can use death as a motivation for doing a worldview investigation instead of just going YOLO and doing whatever we want. And how death can also be a guide for how to go about doing a worldview investigation. So that's the intention of this this presentation that I'm going to be giving. Like I said, and if you ever have any questions or anything, don't hesitate to leave them in the chat, and I will address them afterwards, after the presentation. Going to be given the presentation, and then I'm going to be given some kind of insights that I've learned while kind of arguing in favor of this. This is kind of like a version of Pascal's wager. If you know anything about me, then you know that I think that Pascal was a really smart guy, and I also have a lot of respect for his views on things, and so I think that he had the right idea with the death and the wager. The wager is definitely unavoidable, but I think there's more to it than simply what Pascal goes into. So we'll be going over that in this little presentation that I'm doing today. But without any further delay, let's go ahead and jump into the presentation. So I don't know about you guys, but I didn't ask to be born. Maybe you did, but I certainly didn't. I've had a couple years now in this type of existence, and it's interesting to note that many of us get to be here for quite a while. Granted, it's not forever, but it's longer than a few minutes, or even a few hours. A lot of us get to be here for decades. What should we make of it? This march that we're on, this march towards death. Death, it looms before us like a door at the end of a long hallway, a door that we can't avoid. We can look away and ignore it, but that's a good way for it to come upon you unawares. Everyone opens it eventually, and what happens to them? None of us on this side know for sure. Some say nothing happens. Others say that it's just a door to another hallway like the one we're currently in. Still more say that it's only the beginning of either eternal conscious torment or eternal conscious bliss. One thing's for sure, though. There are no passive observers here. Sure, some people might not care, but everyone will have to open that door and see what waits for them, even those who don't care. What should we make of this, my fellow marchers, my fellow door openers, who are just as surprised to find themselves in this place as I am? What do we do? My time here has taught me a couple lessons. One lesson that my dad taught me growing up is that I should avoid actions that might cause an increase in the misery that I experience. So that lesson was taught with a belt, sometimes on the side of a road right after church. Granted, it took a while for that lesson to really sink in, but I eventually got it. Some other lessons have convinced me that to live in a state of existential fear or anxiety simply doesn't help. We can't let the fear of death paralyze us, but we shouldn't live in a state of indifference or apathy either. As a matter of fact, I think we can use death in two ways. One, as an incentive for investigating worldviews, and two, as a guide on how to go about doing our investigation. So regarding the incentive, let's talk about incentive first. It's important to find the motivation for why we ought to investigate what's beyond the door. At said church, I was taught that if we failed to meet certain criteria, then what met us on the other side of the door was eternal torment. And that is exactly the type of thing I would like to avoid if possible. But, of course, that is just one theory among some competing theories. Maybe it's true that we won't know for sure until we cross over, but we can still come up with a list of what possibly lies beyond death's door. The following is a list of possibilities. So, number 1, eternal conscious torment. Number 2, an experience similar to this one, whether it's a new one or the same one on loop, it doesn't matter here. This is dealing with some kind of temporary conscious experience and or bliss. Number 3, annihilation. Number 4, eternal conscious bliss. This is just a list that I've come up with. Anyone is free to add to the list if they can. But what's more important to note is that the items on the list can be found in the major worldviews globally available today. For me and for most people, the best motivation is the threat of pain, anguish, or loneliness. Honestly, even mild discomfort will be enough to motivate me to investigate something, like what is poking my foot as I walk. So if such small sufferings, such as a poked foot, is sufficient motivation to initiate some kind of investigation, then what could possibly be more motivating than the threat of eternal suffering? But some people are motivated by the prospect of eternal bliss. Whatever it is, I would say that it is adequate motivation to spend the little time we have here on investigation. All right, so how do we go about investigating this? Here's what I think, my fellow marchers. Since we don't have forever to look into this matter, I recommend starting off analyzing worldviews that say the choices we have here in this life impact the one beyond the door of death, death's door. Why is that? Because if I can't change what happens, then it will happen no matter what I do. If I can't change the fact that I'll be going down the river Styx, then I'll be going down the river Styx. If nothing happens after I die, then nothing happens. If what I believe or do has no impact on what happens after I die, then even if the worldview is true, it's not important enough for me to consider it until later on. And no, this is not me saying that having true beliefs isn't important. But what's more important at this early stage is to determine if we can avoid eternal torment. So here are the criteria that I think we should start with in our investigation. Criteria number 1. Any worldview that doesn't have eternal consequences we'd rather avoid should not be investigated until later. Number 2. Any worldview in which our choices in this life don't change our eternal state after death should not be investigated until later. Number 3. Any worldview in which our choices could result in eternal suffering should be treated as true unless or until it's outmatched by a competing worldview during our investigation or proven to be false beyond any doubt. Number 4. Any worldview in which our choices in this life bear negative eternal consequences that are avoidable should be investigated first. Sure, worldviews described in 1 or 2 might be true, but they have little practical advantage, eternally speaking. I'd say look into them if you've become extremely convinced that all the worldviews described in 3 and 4 are false. Those 4 criteria that I provided are merely suggestions. Obviously, you are free to come up with your own. My criteria are focused around the idea that it's possible that what lies for us beyond death's door is eternal conscious torment. And if that can be avoided, then it should be avoided. Since we're starting our investigation with worldviews that teach about eternal conscious torment that is avoidable, we need to compile a list of those worldviews. And as it turns out, the list of worldviews we are looking at is surprisingly short. Most worldviews either have no period or place of eternal torment, or if there is a place of torment, it's finite and or escapable. So here's the list. Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism, and some forms of Wicca. I told you it was short. So that helps us weed out a lot of worldviews. There may be others that say that avoidable eternal conscious torment lies beyond death's door, but we can't investigate them until we discover them. This list is also just to provide a starting point. Personally, I like to have my main focus on one worldview at a time. You could look into them all at the same time if you want. I just think that we can narrow. I just think it's better to focus on one. So, but if we are to focus on one, then which one should we actually be looking into? So, I think that we can narrow down the investigation to one worldview by implementing the following criteria. Number one, number of adherents. Keep in mind that we are not now trying to discover what is true. We are trying to find a starting point for our investigation. So having a high number of adherents isn't a claim to the truth of a worldview. However, I think the appeal of a worldview can help direct us to our starting point. We are also living in a time where we have a lot of resources available to look into this extremely important matter. All right, so the following is a list of major worldviews, and let me just throw this up here real quick. Pop. All right, so these are the major religions right now, the major worldviews. Christianity, Islam, unaffiliated, Hinduism, and Buddhism. So Christianity are the only ones really relevant from our last list. The unaffiliated don't have a generally accepted worldview, so I recommend ignoring that group for now. So if we're going to be looking into worldviews that teach that failure to do certain things results in eternal conscious suffering, then the only ones on this list are Christianity and Islam. So the next criteria is globally diverse. Now, it seems to me that any worldview that is more diverse culturally and regionally ought to be considered first. This is because I believe that if this worldview resonates with a variety of different kinds of people, there must be something particularly appealing about it. This doesn't mean that it's true, just that it remains appealing even from a variety of different cultures and perspectives. It's also the case that these worldviews that are spread out culturally and across the globe have the benefit of being able to have internal debates with people from a wide range of perspectives. And this diversity can help us discover the truth more easily. And so when we talk about worldviews in which global diversity is the thing, we end up seeing that now it seems to me that any worldview that is so please take a look at this image that I have up on the board right here. From my perspective, it seems like Christianity, which is the second from the bottom, has the most evenly distributed, geographically speaking, and by a long shot. It's very even across the board. And it's in the other religions, you see them heavily skewed towards the Asian Pacific region of the globe. But Christianity is not only more spread out, but it's striking how evenly Christianity is spread out across the regions of the globe. And not only that, to help illustrate this a little better, I have another graphic. And the red portions of the globe are Christianity. And so when we talk about diversity and global diversity and things of that nature, it seems to me that Christianity literally has the remaining world surrounded. And so it's definitely more globally diverse than pretty much any other religion. All right, so it seems to me that Christianity should be the start of our investigation, if you're a modern person. So please remember that this is my suggestion, and you are free to go about doing your own investigation any way you want. And just remember that while we will likely have years to look into this matter, you never know when that might get cut short. Death's door is always approaching. So at this stage in our investigation, now that we know we are investigating Christianity, our goal is to prove that Christianity is false beyond any doubt. And you heard that right. Christianity is to be treated as innocent until proven guilty. It's to be treated as true until proven false. Now, why is that? Again, because in rejecting Christianity, we are risking eternal conscious torment. That is something that we do not want to get wrong. So we are better off assuming that it's true until we have very good reasons to believe that it is false. On top of that, all the other worldviews, except a couple others listed in slide number 6, or, this slide, I believe this one. Nope, this one. In this slide, have periods or places of torment that are finite and or escapable. So even if you're wrong about Christianity or Islam or Zoroastrianism, and you end up in a place of torment due to these other religions or other worldviews, since their place of torment is finite, then you won't be suffering for all eternity. And or they are escapable, meaning that you can eventually get out of that place of torment after a long period of time, or there's some way to be able to escape it. It's possible to escape. So even if Christianity turns out to be false, we are likely to escape eternal conscious suffering anyway. So let's say, however, you think considering Christianity to be true right off the bat is too extreme. Well, that's just how the process of falsification works. The main point is that we are looking to prove that Christianity is false. We are not looking to prove that it is true. And in order to prove that it's false, we need to understand that what we would expect to see if it were true, and then try to see if those expectations are met. Now, as it stands, we should start. Now, with all that said, how should we start our investigation of Christianity? All right. So I think we should start with these two questions. What is the worldview, and does it make any falsifiable claims? All right. So when we talk about worldview, let's briefly talk about what a worldview actually is. All right. So according to James Sire in his book, The Universe Next Door, a worldview is essentially a commitment and a fundamental orientation of the heart that can be expressed in a story or in a set of propositions, or presuppositions, or assumptions which may be true, partially true, or entirely false, that we hold consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently about the basic constitution of reality, and that provides the foundation on which we live and move and have our being. Everybody has a worldview. Most people haven't really given this kind of stuff much consideration, so they don't have a fully fleshed out worldview. But nevertheless, they do hold to a worldview. And a lot of what needs to be done as humans is discovering what we believe it is, how the world is constituted, understanding that, and then trying to make it correspond with reality as closely as possible. We should constantly be asking, why should I prefer my worldview over a competing worldview? That's a very important question. All right, so I recommend that we start by determining what Christianity is. What even is Christianity? How do we find out? This is just a beginning, so we should look at Christianity in broad brushstrokes. We can flesh out the details later. When doing worldview analysis, I think we need to determine the most trusted sources for that particular worldview. And for Christianity, that is the Bible. Sure, there are arguments about whether to include the apocryphal writings or if the Bible needs to be supplemented with another book and perhaps certain traditions. But if all there are different, but in all their different lists for things that should be included, a trusted source, as what should be considered as a trusted source, all the major sects and denominations of Christianity have the Bible as one of them. That means that both the New Testament and the Old Testament. So for now, let's consider the Bible the most trusted source for Christianity. If you think we should include other books or exclude parts of the Bible, all of the Bible, that's up to you. So what do the sources say? There are many resources available online for us to find out without having to read the whole Bible. That book is really big. But here is a list of propositions I think are cardinal Christian teachings. All right, so number one, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this God exists, and that God created the universe. Heaven and hell are real places. Number 4, God is the king of the universe. Number 5, humans have rebelled against God. Number 6, Jesus existed. Number 7, Jesus was sent by God to restore humanity to God. Number 8, Jesus was crucified for the sins of humanity. Number 9, Jesus rose from the grave. Number 10, Jesus rising from the grave vindicates his claims. Number 11, humans are to acknowledge Jesus as Lord and that his crucifixion was sufficient punishment to restore them to God. And 12, humans earn a one-way ticket to hell by failing to do 11. All right, so feel free to add or take away anything from the list. Just remember that we are trying to truthfully represent Christianity in a broad sense. This is what I think Christianity is in a nutshell. There's a lot more that can be said, but I think that this is a fair representation. There could be a couple things that are adjusted here and there, but you can also just go with the Apostles' Creed or the Creed in Nicaea. That would be a good one too. But so number 2, does it make any falsifiable claims? Just as a reminder, we're talking about this number 2 question, does it make any falsifiable claims? By falsifiable, I simply mean that a claim can be proven false. For example, the claim all swans are white can be proven false by discovering one swan that is not white. Falsifiable claims are the only way that we can prove that a worldview is false. Unfortunately, with eternal conscious torment on the line, I think we ought to grant a worldview all of its unfalsifiable claims. However, if one of its central claims is falsifiable and is proven beyond any doubt to be false, then, in my opinion, that would lend some justification for someone risking eternal conscious torment by rejecting that worldview. Depends on how gutsy you are, I guess, and what you have to gain for rejecting that worldview. I also think that we ought to prefer worldviews in which one or more of its central claims are falsifiable, but those claims have not been proven to be false. Those worldviews would be preferred over and above worldviews that have no central claims that are falsifiable, and of course, any worldviews that have central claims that are falsifiable which have been proven false. That's because I think true falsifiable claims should qualify as evidence, while true unfalsifiable claims can't. Of course, you're free to disagree. I'd just like to know why you would prefer an unfalsifiable claim over a falsifiable one. Seems odd. It would certainly be a leap of faith. Now, are there any falsifiable claims listed here? And I have them boxed off. So from my perspective, I think that number 6 and number 9 are falsifiable. I know that some people think that 1 or perhaps 2 are falsifiable. I just think that's disputable, to say the least. I really don't think that you could ever falsify the existence of God, but you can try. To be sure, yes, part of 8. Now that's not to say that you can't. I think that you can make arguments against the existence of particular gods. I think that's possible, but when I talk about God, I'm talking about some sort of supernatural creative being that has sufficient power to create the universe, sufficient knowledge to create the universe, and can a being that is conscious and has the ability to make choices, and also has goodness. But yeah, to be sure, yes, part of 8 is falsifiable. But how do we falsify that Jesus' crucifixion was for the sins of humanity? So I recommend that the person starting their investigation turn their attention to 2 or 9 and try to see if they can prove that they are false. Remember, this is to prove that that's false beyond any doubt. I recommend that I recommend that if we do their investigation, that if they do their investigation and sit back and think something like, yeah, it's very unlikely that Jesus rose from the dead, but maybe it's possible, then 9 has not been proven false. It's not been proven false. So you're better off believing it. But the actual investigation of Jesus' resurrection is beyond the scope of this presentation, and I thank you guys very much for listening. So thank you very much for listening and watching the video. Now, I'm going to spend a little time talking about some responses that I typically get for this. And the first one I'm going to talk about is that some people like to bring up different, like, pagan religions, their afterlives and things of that nature. Routinely, when I have conversations with pagans, they talk about an afterlife in which the personality is split, in which a part of you is suffering, but another part of you is experiencing bliss. And so, if it is the case that you can have a reprieve from the suffering, then it's not as bad as hell. Okay, and that's the main thing. Is the afterlife as bad as hell as it is classically depicted in Christianity and Islam? What we're talking about here is eternal suffering, and so if that afterlife isn't something that you would prefer to avoid over hell, then you should go with the worldview that contains the hell. You need to be trying to prove that hell is false, or that the true the cardinal claims of that religion is false. And also, when I talk to non-Christians about this, they have a tendency to want to bring up possible hypothetical worldviews in which the afterlife bears eternal conscious suffering, and they multiply those possible worlds endlessly, and I find that to be irrelevant and not important to the conversation, because what I'm focusing here on is worldviews that have longevity, that have survived the course of time, have an enormous following, have undergone serious debate and consideration and thought. This is not some off-the-cuff Christianity. Whatever you think about it, Christianity is simply not a shooting from the hip religion. This is a religion that has been around for 2,000 years, and if you consider the Judea aspect of Christianity, then it goes beyond that. There is just no comparison in my mind from when comparing Christianity to a ad hoc and just a worldview that has only been crafted as a rebuttal to this particular argument. It bears no power whatsoever from my perspective. And even if it is true, then it just bears, and you have to have all those beliefs in place, and we all, except for maybe one person, end up experiencing eternal conscious suffering, and I don't have access to the truth of that particular religion or worldview, then there's not much I can do to avoid it, So I think you're better off doing the investigation of worldviews that are well established in the, globally speaking, in the human community, Another thing that people have a tendency to have a trouble with is the fact that I talk about saying that you need to treat Christianity as true until it's proven false beyond any doubt. And there's two aspects of that. They have problems with us treating Christianity as true. Now, there's a big difference between treating something as true and believing something is true. Okay, let me bring up that slide real quick. That talks about that. I think it's this one. The reason why I'm saying there's a big difference between saying that something should be treated as true and believing that it's true. You can treat something as true without believing that it's true. Okay, and this is what Pascal is getting at in his Pensées regarding the wager. If you treat it as true and are unable to falsify it to the standards that I talk about here, then during that investigation, it may end up being the case that you come to believe that it's true. And so it's not necessary to believe that it's true. And some people will say, well, I can't get myself to believe that it's true. That's okay. In science, I used to do nuclear chemistry at a nuclear power plant, and sometimes we would be taking samples and get analyses that came back divergent from what we expected to see, and we would generate some hypotheses, and sometimes those hypotheses could have been long shots. However, and we wouldn't believe that they were true, but we would treat the system and behave as if it were true until we falsified that hypothesis with maybe by taking other samples or taking readings of pressure gauges, tank levels, and things of that nature. We would treat a hypothesis as true until it was falsified. And we may not have believed that, for example, there was like a seawater leak or something like that, but we would treat it as though that were true until we falsified it. And once we falsified it, we would we would go to the next hypothesis. And it would always be the hypothesis that matched the data the best, and we would start off with the hypothesis that had the most severe consequences. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is not some crazy thing, but this is a technique that I've learned while during my time in nuclear power. Going through the nuclear pipeline in the Navy and operating nuclear propulsion submarines for 6 years, and then going to the civilian world and operating a nuclear power plant for 8. This is a technique that I've learned doing science in those arenas, and it is perfectly valid. Considering the consequences of particular scenarios and then treating that as true until we falsify it is a routine thing. Another thing that people have a difficulty with is falsifying it beyond any doubt, and the justification for that is in the consequences. We're talking about eternal conscious suffering here. This is the kind of suffering that goes on forever. That's significant. And so while other consequences are more finite, and so we can brush them away as not being, we can bear the weight of those consequences, such as like taking a left turn out into a street. There have been times when I've taken a left turn while driving that I have wondered whether or not I would be hit by the other car, and I apply the gas. And there are certain situations like that where you're willing to take the risk. But there has been similar situations in which I was taking a left turn in which my baby daughter was with me that I definitely did not take. And there was times when I knew that I would make it, but I still didn't take it, just in case, for whatever reason, I would get hit and my daughter would suffer injury. So when we're talking about consequences that we'd rather avoid, those do impact our decisions on how much evidence is required to believe or reject a proposition. And so this is something that we interact with all the time. Beliefs and lack of beliefs require not only epistemic justification, but also pragmatic justifications. And that's just a consequence of living in a world in which we're finite knowers, and also we could fail to exist. And so if we could be damaged or experience pain or the pain of others, then that is going to weigh in on whether or not we accept something as true or false. And it's really important to understand. Another thing that there's only really one other thing that I want to talk about, and I can't remember it right now, but yeah, if it comes up, then I will make a video addressing it. But those are the big things I wanted to talk about in reference to this argument. I personally I'm a big fan of Pascal's wager. I think that it's a very good, very reasonable position to take. And I think that we should be striving to understand the world as it stands and how it actually is. But we also need to consider the consequences of being wrong. From my perspective, from me, worldviews that contain no afterlife or don't have eternal conscious suffering should not even be on the table for consideration until we have eliminated these other plausible worldviews that contain eternal conscious suffering, and whether or not you have a belief right now that Christianity is or Islam is plausible, I think that you would need to reassess that. Because I've been doing this investigation for a long time now, and they are definitely in the plausible region. They're definitely in the possible region. And if they're in the possible region, then they should be preferred over any worldview that doesn't contain eternal suffering. If I am wrong about worldviews that contain atheism, in which we're annihilated after we die, if I'm wrong about that and I live my life as a Christian, yes, I don't experience eternal bliss, but I also don't experience eternal suffering of any kind. I just get annihilated. And that, to me, is not a particularly troublesome scenario. And another thing that people like to talk about is with regard to comparing Christianity with versions of atheistic worldviews, is that Christianity has high expectations for behavior. There are very relevant costs to becoming a Christian, and that's true. Jesus definitely says, count the cost. Christianity is not an easy worldview. It can be very difficult at times, but when you're going through it, you'll find that God is definitely more than able to help you through it. But what they really say is that, especially people who are living in conditions in which Christianity routinely calls sin, especially when we're talking about sexual kind of things, sexual orientation, having sex outside of marriage, or we're talking about honoring your parents, or if we're talking about loving your neighbor in certain ways, or loving God especially, and going to church and reading the Bible, doing spiritual exercises like meditation, fasting, recognizing spiritual virtues and exercising those virtues. That can be a lot of work. And a lot of people don't like to get up early on Sunday and go to church and hang out with people. But I'm going to tell you right now, and so they say that cost is significant. And so that lends me justification for rejecting it. But what you need to understand is that you're weighing those finite instances of suffering against eternal conscious suffering. That to me, they are not even something comparable. Another thing is that what was I going to say? Also, while I've been a Christian for a number of years now, and I will say that at first, prayer, reading and studying the Bible, improving in character, and expressing Christian virtues like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, things like that, they can be difficult at first, but once you do it, you find that it's kind of like exercise, in which exercise is very difficult to start doing, but once you do it, you have a craving to do it, and you find that your life is better. Like you feel more healthy if you do it appropriately and eat healthy and things like that. When you do these healthy things, you're better suited to take on hardships and to do difficult tasks. And I've learned while being a Christian that the fellowship with other Christians can sometimes be difficult, but it's also very, it can be helpful, you know. I have a lot of Christian friends now that help me in times of difficulty, even just yesterday. Like, but yeah, and these relationships actually end up strengthening you. And so what you might consider to be high costs are actually beneficial when you actually start exercising them. And so we have to take into I cannot see in any possible world in which suffering for eternity has hidden benefits to it. You know, like unlike exercise, you know, I suffer the difficulty of pushing the weight and the pain of ripping the muscles in order to get stronger, and the fatigue and the sweating and the grunting and all that is suffering. But you know, I get the ability of operating more smoothly, of becoming stronger and being better suited for doing things. Not the same with eternal conscious suffering. Not the same at all. And so that's about it. That's all I have for this talk. I really hope that you guys appreciated it, and I'm glad to have finally gotten it up on my YouTube channel, which I can refer to other people as well. Please feel free to leave a comment if you watch this video after the stream, and thank you very much for watching. Thank you, and God bless. Hey, before you go, I hope you enjoyed today's enlightening discussion during our Christian Apologetics book study. It's always a blessing to come together to explore our faith and grow in our understanding. Your participation means the world to me, and I'm grateful for your continued support of Northeast Christian Apologetics. Remember, you can stay connected with me and access valuable resources by visiting my website at nechristianapologetics.com. There you'll find a wealth of articles, videos, and recommended reading material to deepen your knowledge of Christian apologetics. If you're as passionate as I am about equipping believers to defend their faith and engage in meaningful conversations, you can also support this ministry in various ways. One way to support this work is through patreon.com. By becoming a patron, you'll have access to exclusive content, early access to our discussions, and a chance to connect with like-minded individuals who share your passion for Christian apologetics. If Patreon is not your style, some people prefer to give me a one-time tip. And if you'd like to do that, then feel free to do so through Venmo or Cash App. But of course, there are many ways to support me. By praying for this ministry, sharing the content on social media, or simply spreading the word about what I do. Every bit of support goes a long way in helping me fulfill my mission. Once again, thank you for joining me today. Your presence and engagement enrich these discussions, and together, we're on a journey to strengthen our faith and share the good news with others. Stay tuned for more exciting book studies, thought-provoking discussions, and opportunities to grow your Christian apologetics journey. I look forward to seeing you again.